Matt Canavan, for his sins, gets sent to Canberra, but it is the job he kind of puts his hand up for every 6 years. He joins us, of course, from there, and the man who, no doubt, for rewarding to talking points, will be sent to the Senate at some time in his lifetime, Joe Hildebrand.
I'm just here with Matt for the Catholic caucus. This is the right room.
All right. Now, let's start here. Matt, we're going to fall right into where I suppose the super lefties want us to go, which is to be, three angry old blokes having a go at kids voicing their opinion. But I'm going to go there anyway, right, which is about these student strikes that are going to happen later this week. Now, again, these kids are being used just as they were by the Greens and other forces in the lead up to the last election because, remember the climate strikes? Well, the climate didn't magically get fixed because you got the government that you wanted, all right? China still exists, polluting plenty more till 2030, but all of the strikes stopped. So are the kids being exploited or are the kids getting out there and speaking on the behalf of other kids that are dying in Gaza? Matt?
Well, say a couple of things here, Paul. First of all, I really feel uncomfortable involving our children in this generational conflict that's occurring in the Middle East. I just don't think there's much to be gained with trying to co-opt children into this debate. It's certainly not going to solve any issues. That's of course true, as you've said. The second thing I'd like to say is I think it's pretty clear that at least for some of these children in some schools, they'll be getting indoctrinated by a certain worldview by some of their teachers, and I find that very sad because I loved history when I was at school, and I was very, very fortunate to be taught by some excellent history teachers, Mr. Grulich, if he's out there still, who really helped change my life. And they presented both sides of the argument. That history teacher, Mr. Grulich, he grew up in East Germany and could have easily gone on screeds against Bolshevism and communism, but he actually did a really good job of teaching both sides of the argument, exposing children to both for and against of different points of view. I doubt that's happening for some of our young children in some of these schools, and I think it's very unfortunate that they'll be taught such a one-sided view of history.
Joe, again, I understand that passion starts at different ages, but it's the fact that this is pro forma way, which is when you want to win a cause, for want of a better term, focus in on the kids because doesn't everyone want to think of the children, right? Will there be people that will have passionately followed this for months and months? Sure, but it won't be the bulk of them.
Yeah, I think, kids are obviously always going to be rebellious and they're always going to want any excuse to wag school. Yep. I certainly did, and I certainly did. I think my real concern is that you've got adults actively egging them on and, quite frankly, sort of almost pushing them. And by this I mean the Greens. I'm not sure if there's any activism in the classroom or not, but the idea that the Greens would actually sort of push them into a position where they are, by default, supporting a terrorist organisation that's revealed itself to be every bit as brutal and ugly and horrific as ISIS. And I think a lot of these kids will probably come to their senses later in life and think, oh my God, I can't believe I marched in support of Hamas. The other question is, because again, Hamas is the elected government of Gaza, and there is no getting away from that. It did not seize power. It was elected a very long time ago, and in the West Bank of Jerusalem, they're worried that Hamas would get elected if there are elections there. So,
forgive me for interrupting, Matt. You're in the Sky News Canberra bureau now, right? Aren't you?
Yep, I'm in the press gallery.
Did somebody move Big Ben into the studio with you? Because all I can hear is a ticking clock that is constantly going off behind you. I don't know what's happening here.
Well, I don't
Someone's
know about
body
that,
clock, my body clock, but dear God, all I can hear is
here.
click, click, click. Like they're all going off at once.
The clocks are very, very loud.
It's the climate
I don't know
clock.
why it is, but if you're in here on your own, it's quite disconcerting. But,
it's like they're still set to daytime.
Every day it takes, it's like school here. It's like school here, Paul. So you hear that second clock, it's like, it's so long till the end of the day.
Edgar Allan Poe.
I'm pretty sure we spent some money on soundproofing in that studio, but anyway. Now, let's talk about cost of living. And again, Joe, we've talked about it every week because it is relentless.
Yep.
Today, about housing affordability. On top of that, this fundamental idea that I have issues with, which is if you add more demand for people that are trying to rent a home, it becomes more complicated. Today I was reading that some significant portion, like a quarter, of all of the land that Queensland has been holding on to eventually one day turn into homes is unviable, can't be used. So there is no magic wand here. But honestly, the Prime Minister, again, nice of him to stop over. Please, he's got the Lonely Planet Guide Fish Week if he wants to, as he tours the world, as he flies to the moon and beyond. But no real focus on this when Parliament returns.
Yeah, look, I think it is just one of those things where it is difficult. The government has already had its fingers burned by over-promising in the election campaign, so it can't.
So now it should under-deliver as a government.
Well, I think it's probably going to be very wary of making promises that it can't keep. I think the situation has been worse, obviously, than I think pretty much everyone expected. We thought the rate hikes were it was just wishful thinking, but we thought the rate hikes were probably over, and then we got that higher than expected number in the lead up to November, hence the Cup Day hike. But again, I think it is a difficult circle to square because, there are concerns obviously about immigration numbers and housing supply. We need to get much, much, much more housing supply online ASAP. By the same token, we've got all these bottlenecks in the economy that are being that are holding up supply and therefore causing inflation to rise because we have skills shortages. We don't have enough workers to do jobs. So it is a very difficult one. People often raise the number of students coming in. Well, that's a big export for Australia. We're selling them our education. Yes, they're here when we sell it to them, but they spend their money and they pay big money to do it. And that's money that can then be used to spend on Australians. So it is a difficult one. It is a as I've kind of done. I hope I don't have splinters in my ass, but it is one that for every claim there is an equally valid counterclaim.
Sure, but my issue on
it's pretty clear, Paul. The government has botched. They have botched our emergence from COVID. They have totally stuffed this up, and the sooner they admit that and reorient, the better for all of us. Obviously, we needed to let more people in once we opened the borders up after COVID. We'd gone a couple of years without having any net migration, and there were a lot of workforce shortages. But the government here has opened the floodgates without any plan to house a number of people the size of Canberra every year. That's what they're bringing in now. It's more than double our long-term average of net migration. It's had an enormous impact on the housing market. It's a big reason for why inflation here in Australia is being so persistent and higher than most other developed countries. So we've got to get that under control. And what frustrates me right now is everybody can see that now. Blind Freddie can see it. You might give the government maybe a little bit of slack given the uniqueness of COVID and the need to open up afterwards. But you shouldn't be giving them any slack now that their pig-headed refusal to recognise that this is the cause of so much pain and they need to restrain the migration numbers going forward. There's no evidence they're even considering this or reviewing it. They're just leaving these floodgates open, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
Now, let's go to speed round. Joe, what I had to mention at the start of the show about Anastasia Palaszczuk. Again, yes. Queensland Labor is a very fit machine, right? It's kept itself in for a long time. It's very good at burrowing itself in layers of layers of layers now that mean everyone keeps paying back up to their political gods. But it is outrageous, and I would say it the same if I heard about the Liberal Party doing it in New South Wales or the previous federal government, to spend the best part of $400,000 taxpayers' money to have a rolling survey for the year leading into an election that you can constantly double-check with, which is overtly political. It shouldn't be allowed. In the same way I think that there should be in all of the laws of state and federal governments, which is $0 spending on government advertising 12 months out from an election, this sort of stuff should not even be available to a government a year out from an election.
Yeah, I actually think it's part of a broader, creepier trend in the left of the Labor Party, which holds power in both Queensland and Victoria, and it's Queensland and Victorian governments that behave in this manner, where they think that they don't actually have to engage with the media, but that they can control the media, that they can have their own outlets like Pravda, and actually basically just, instead of dealing with a free and fair or sometimes free and unfair media and dealing with those slings and arrows, they just say, well, right, we're just going to tell our own story. And inevitably, you tell the story based on what people want to hear, which is why you have all the polling and the qualitative research, the focus groups and all that stuff. And you condition it to get the best response from people, often the most emotive response, and you can see it with the social media accounts of Dan Andrews, which were done incredibly well. I actually know the kid used to do it as a friend of mine. But
shout out to the dark artist.
Very smart. And again, the same thing with Palaszczuk, with her own Palaszczuk news channel on Facebook or whatever, and recruiting everyone from the press gallery. Other regimes have done this in the past, and they haven't been the most democratic ones.
No, and that's the thing. It's just fundamentally wrong, all right? Not because it delivers political outcomes I don't like. It's fundamentally wrong because of what Joe says about the inability to actually engage with the people they don't employ or don't control. I've got 90 seconds left here, so I wanted to ask you about an interesting thing I read today, Matt, because I need you to try to translate it for me, which is the government is looking into a thing called carbon leakage, where we're talking about tariffs about international carbon leakage. Now, does this mean a tariff goes on exports or a tariff is put on imports? Because one is an obvious consequence for Australia.
Well, from this perspective, it's the Australian government putting a tax on imports to Australia. But the fact they're even considering this, Paul, is an admission of guilt. It's an admission that the government's climate policies, in particular, the carbon tax they've put on our major manufacturing industries, is hurting those industries. You wouldn't need a tariff to protect these industries if their carbon tax in the original place wasn't hurting their industries. Now, they've been denying that, but this is incontrovertible evidence that their carbon taxes is costing Australian jobs, and now we've got to put up more taxes to protect the taxes that we put on in the first place. Why don't we just get rid of the carbon tax altogether at the start, and then we're all in a better position and pay less tax overall.
Look at that, with seconds to spare. God love you both. Thank you so much, Joe.
You told me I was good at that.
Mate, look at that, that's what I'm telling you. You land the plane.
I can hear it.
Correct.